Welcome to part 13 of the mini golf marble machine build. In this video, I'm going to continue laying down plaster cloth on the rest of the open areas and then begin applying molded rocks to the surface. Here, you can see a decent amount of the surface has been formed, and you may be able to begin imagining what the final version may look like. Before I could lay down more plaster cloth, I needed to create a support structure, so I started by making some more backing with magazine pages and tape. Then, I used popsicle sticks to make a support structure on the machine. This helped prevent having to stack up an unnecessary amount of crumpled paper. To protect the paint on the lift, I turned on the machine and wrapped it in tape as it spun. Then, I covered all the other vulnerable sections in tape as well. Next, I placed the crumpled paper in place. Now it was time to add the plaster cloth. I started with some of the difficult areas so I wouldn't have any issues applying the cloth later on. The area around the lift was tricky because of the tunnels and having to avoid connecting to the corkscrew on the lift. I'm working on all the areas except the very outer edge. It'll be difficult to access the inside of the machine if it's walled off, so I'm saving it for later on in the process. Now that the plaster cloth was covering a large majority of the machine, it was time to start working on the rocks. Using these molds, I'm going to make plaster rocks that can be pieced together like a puzzle. Making this requires a measuring cup, plaster powder, an empty glass, and water. First, I set up the molds so they weren't tipping. Then, I followed the directions on the box. It calls for 1 part water to 2.5 parts powder. I measured out half a cup of water and then poured that into an empty glass. Then, I measured 1 1/4 cups of the powder. I poured the water back in and mixed it thoroughly for 2 minutes, making sure there were no chunks in the cup. I poured it into the chosen molds, sometimes only pouring in a little bit to make a thinner rock. Then, I poked it with a popsicle stick to spread it out and to make sure there weren't any air bubbles. After a decent amount of time, the rocks can be taken out of the molds. They pop out pretty easily, and you can see how much detail comes from one of these molds. I laid out all the rocks to make it easy to pick the right piece for the right area. The leftover plaster in the measuring cup easily scrapes out after it hardens. That definitely helps when multiple batches are needed. I figured that since the rocks are a bit less messy than the plaster cloth, I could remove the tape. If something came off the rocks, it would only be crumbs that could easily be vacuumed. Unfortunately, it was here that I learned that the tape I was using was either poor quality or old, because it took off some of the paint it was supposed to protect. I knew I'd have to touch up paint down the road, but I wasn't expecting this to happen. Oh well, it is what it is. Alright, now I could finally start putting on the rocks. I first chose a piece and sanded it down to best fit in the space, often making it thinner so it didn't protrude from the wall too much. Then, I used scenic glue and hot glue to attach it to the plaster cloth. The cloth has no problem supporting the rocks because there are multiple layers of it. Once a rock was in place, I could pick another one to fit next to it. Piece by piece, I covered the vertical sections with a layer of rocks. And that's it for this video. In the next video, I'll be adding some more molded rocks and filling in all the spaces in between them with a special paste to clean up the look.